First things first, this video contains spoilers for Not Simple by Natsume Ono. It's a short manga you can read in one sitting as it's only 14 chapters long, and I urge you to check it out before you watch this video. Just a little tip though, the correct order to read it in is prologue, chapters 1 through 12, epilogue, but I'd low-key recommend reading the prologue last since it is chronologically the last chapter and I don't really think I gained anything from reading it first. Reading it last honestly might give you a better experience, but I mean ultimately do what you want, I don't really care. Also, if you do read it, be wary that it is very messed up and not suitable for the faint of heart, although I assume that if you clicked on a video called this, your mind is already beyond repair. So hi, I'm Fetus, welcome to the community. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Comments and likes also help out a lot, and really quickly, I just released music on all streaming platforms I know of. Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, Deezer, the list goes on. Excluding YouTube for now, because I'm still kind of trying to figure out how I want to do that. It's called Fetal and it contains instrumentals I use in my videos as well as some stuff where I sing too. Links in the description, thanks for checking it out if you do, and I'll get to the fucking video now. Not Simple chronologically starts off with a woman named Kylie being released from prison in Melbourne. Kylie gets in contact with her father to find out that he and Kylie's mother got divorced while she was locked up, and that the mom has moved to London, illegally bringing Kylie's younger brother Ian with her. Illegally because the mother isn't actually Ian's biological mother. Things aren't going too well in London. Ian's quote-unquote mother is an alcoholic with no money, and the around 13-year-old Ian at this point has to do odd jobs here and there to support them, and a majority of the money goes straight to booze. That's already worst parent of the year material, I know, but the moment she's solidified as worst character so far is when she literally just gives Ian over to a pimp. Yeah, a lot of people aren't suited to be parents, we can admit that, and people do things that traumatize their kids, such as drown their own frustration and sorrow in alcohol, or act in a very dismissive or even aggressive way, and while this already sucks so hard for a kid, you have to be on a whole other level of fucked up. Like, you need to hate a child to do what she does here. And not only hate the child, but you as a person need to lack like 50% of your frontal cortex just to give a kid off to a pimp and continue on with your life. Unbelievably fucked up people and scenarios are about to become common themes for this manga in a minute though, so buckle up. Kylie eventually arrives to London to send Ian back to his father in Melbourne. Ian is thrilled to see Kylie as she appears to be the only family member he actually likes, but he quickly finds out that she won't be coming along with him. Kylie asks Ian if he has any goals or aspirations, and when Ian answers yes, they make a deal to meet up again once Ian has achieved his goal and they go their separate ways. I think this is the first peek into Ian's I guess peculiar character. Most kids his age would likely be frightened and extremely traumatized going through the stuff Ian has, and when he's finally presented with the comfort of a person he really cares about and feels safe around, that comfort is stripped away from him in an instant, and he seemingly barely bats an eye. I mean, you'd at least expect a tear or two from this bloke, for fuck's sake. Nah, he's like, oh well, carry on. Additionally, Ian's aforementioned goal is simply to beat the 1,000 meter running record of a runner he really looks up to, and we're not talking about a world record or anything particularly impressive here, it's just something really personal to him. Ian's dream is basically the equivalent of wanting to score a single goal in a soccer match when the field is filled with people striving to be the next Ronaldo. It's so modest that when he does eventually break the record in a contest after years of trying, he doesn't even finish first. I think he finishes like third overall, but celebrates on that track like he had just achieved the most magnificent athletic feat imaginable. This honestly resonated with me a fair bit. I'm not a very competitive person and find personal goals I set for myself far more satisfying to achieve than having the whole audience do a standing ovation after a performance they found impressive. Of course, being the GOAT at something can be a very personal goal too. I'm not saying that, I just find I often settle for less, just like Ian does with running, and I'm probably a lot happier because of it. Meanwhile, a freelance journalist called Jim occasionally interviews Ian for a sports segment in a magazine, and they end up forming some sort of friendship. Ian hears that Kylie currently lives in America, and coincidentally Jim is moving to New York, so Ian joins him and travels the states on foot to look for his sister. Again, another example of his unorthodox approach to things. Without too much thought, this dude just packs a bag and starts walking, because that's an efficient way to find someone in a country with 300 million people. Granted, it's never specified what time period the story takes place in. I think it's plausible that the events happen somewhere in the 80s or the 90s, so finding a person isn't really going to be as easy as today. But like, homie could have worked for a couple of months, get some moolah and use the train or some shit, right? But yeah, I'm definitely not saying this is like a problem with the story or bad writing or anything like that. Quite the opposite, actually. It really intensifies this aspect of Ian's character that says, this dude does things his way and only his way, which may not be the most complex theme for a protagonist, but the way it's executed is extremely intriguing. A few months after Ian started his search for Kylie, he returns to Jim's place wearing a suit he received from a woman who randomly picked him up from the streets and took him out to dinner. They ended up spending the evening together on a beach, and they had a heartfelt conversation where Ian convinced her not to run away and rather stay with her family, and they made a promise to meet again in 3 years. After arriving back at Jim's place, Ian opens up about his mother selling him to prostitution after Jim offers him some gum, as the pimp Ian was giving to always gave him gum if he behaved well. Even in this moment, at least on the surface, Ian appears calm and not particularly traumatized by the thing that happened to him. It's actually slightly confusing how similar Jim and the pimp look, but rest assured they are different people. I'll admit though, I was fucking bamboozled by the similarities on my first read. Shortly after, Ian finds out Kylie is locked up at a prison in London for trying to kill her boyfriend. Ian leaves to look for Kylie once more, but by the time he gets to London, he finds out Kylie has died in prison from a fatal case of pneumonia. After hearing about this, Ian goes to visit his mother, and it's with this encounter that the devastating and quite frankly skin-twistingly disgusting plot twist of this manga is revealed. Final spoiler warning: if you've gotten this far in the video and still haven't read Not Simple, this is the last time I'm warning you. Ian's mother reveals to him that he is the result of incest between his father and his sister Kylie. Kylie had a horrible relationship with her mother, and as a 14-year-old had a child with her own dad to get back at her mom. When I tell you my fucking jaw dropped, goddamn. This actually sheds some light on why Ian's fake mom, I guess, turned out the way she did. With each passing year, Ian grew to resemble his father more and more, and she ended up despising Ian because of it. Still doesn't excuse the way she acted, but at least now we know why, I guess. Kylie, on the other hand, one of the more likable characters in the story, suddenly becomes, to put it lightly, pretty fucking unlikable. But the biggest bad actor in this whole mess is obviously the father. Ian's dad is a character who's kind of been the underlying, or should I say, over your head looming type of antagonist this entire time. I'm not a very good analyzer of writing, so maybe antagonist isn't the correct term, but he sure as hell is a villain. He has very few lines in the entire story, but regardless, is an aspect of it that is on your mind the whole way through, almost resembling a Johann Lieber or Griffith in a way. Not saying that he's a top tier antagonist or villain necessarily, but the suspense around this character is created in a masterful way. Also, just to be clear, because I want to be very careful with shit like this, all of this obviously doesn't make Ian's character disgusting or any less likable. It's not the kid's fault in a situation like this, and he's a man who keeps getting beat down in unimaginable ways, but despite it all, keeps walking. And despite this idea being one that's basically the backbone of most generic shonen protagonists, the sheer magnitude of his fucked up experiences make him one of the more intriguing protagonists I've had the pleasure, or I guess displeasure, of reading about in a hot minute. After hearing about his past, Ian goes to visit Kylie's boyfriend, now living in New York, and he's revealed to be the pimp who took advantage of Ian during his time in London. Ian returns to Jim's place holding pieces of gum, and it's at this moment we witness Ian finally breaking down. Laying on the floor on his knees, screaming in despair with tears falling from his eyes, all the immense pressure finally gets to him. Jim runs to the pimp's apartment, where he learns that the man told Kylie about the things he had done to Ian, and this is the reason she tried to kill him. The man also reveals that Kylie didn't actually die of pneumonia. She contracted a different disease from the pimp that actually ended up killing her and Ian is also carrying the same disease. The implication being that Ian has been HIV positive since the days this man took advantage of him. At this point, with everything stripped away from him, the only glimmer of hope Ian has left is his promise to meet with the woman who took her out to dinner while he was searching for Kylie. This is where we jump into the prologue in the chronological order of things, where a weathered Ian is picked up from the street by a stranger. Her name is Irene, and she buys Ian food, much like the woman he met 3 years prior. Ian is there waiting for the woman as his final straw of hope, and Jim, meanwhile, is ready at the train station waiting for Ian. Irene is coincidentally revealed to be the woman's daughter, and even more shockingly, the woman is Ian's father's new wife. Ian's dad is highly possessive and controlling of Irene and mistakes Ian for Irene's boyfriend. He orders Ian to be killed, and moments later Jim and Irene find Ian in a restroom, bleeding to death from a stab wound. The story of this man couldn't possibly get any more grim. Everything was stripped away from him, and his entire life was the result of other people's incompetence. It took a lot to break him, but he eventually did cave in. According to Jim, in Ian's final moments, he has already accepted death. As depressing and dark as all of that was, I really hope you all enjoyed this video. I'm happy to finally talk about a manga I kinda found by chance and think deserves a lot more attention. By the way, I know I made this poll and this video wasn't even on it, but this thing is gonna take forever to make, so I'm just gonna work on it little by little. Thanks for being patient. I think that's it. I hope you all have a great day. Peace.